Welcome, everyone. Again, this is DOCTALKs, a ministry of the Virginia region, but shared with the whole church in hopes that it would be helpful. But we welcome everybody to this particular DOCTALKs, which ironically here on Zoom is going to be focused on the non-technical kind of ways the church has been able to adapt during COVID-19 situations. So remembering that this is a conversation and not necessarily a lecture or that. So some of you have been invited to share your stories, but remember, everyone, please share your stories. And we're looking at things today with regard to different ways that we've been able to adapt. I've heard of people actually might be getting tired of Zoom meetings. You can just shake your heads. I am. And yet I've also watched the church do some pretty amazing things. And some of you have those stories to share today where we have learned to do things or relearned ways that are not technical at all to be good church. So just want to start out there today. I don't have anything to bring to you, but some of you do. So if you do, raise your hand and just share your story of maybe what your church has been doing that has been helpful during this time that's not necessarily technical. So does anybody want to go first? Excellent. Then I get a call on somebody. I'm going to start with JB because he's in my top left-hand corner. Up at Blacksburg, they have been, during this period, been doing some pretty creative parking lot drive-in kind of church. And I just want him maybe talk about what's been going on there and your experience with that.
Well, we are fortunate that we have probably the flattest geographic location in Blacksburg. We can park about 100 vehicles on our back lot. So we when the onset of all this, when we first shut down, and as many churches are, you know, mostly older folks and a lot of ours they don't even have email. So we're blessed. We have a rental place right under the hill from us. So we got a scissor lift and parkers. We keep it under 10 parkers every Sunday, and we pull them in, we park them, and then we go up on the scissor lift and preach. And Gary is not on the call today. He had to go to the hospital for a situation, but it's been good so far. The board was very supportive of it. We got speakers, and we actually put those on the roof on opposite ends. So sound's been good. Attendance has been good, probably up 25 to 30% from what it was inside. So it's been really good. People like it because they still get to see each other but not touch each other. And we park all the cars, and all of our parkers have masks and gloves, and we keep the support staffs under 10. So, and we actually package our communion individually with gloves and masks, grapes and bread, and it's been good so far. So but I'd be happy to field any questions on logistics, because it is an undertaking. It's much more so than sanctuary worship or Zoom worship.
I know that I've had questions from some. When you're doing this, do you have problems with your neighbors?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because when we got the sound equipment, because we weren't equipped with sound equipment to do what we're doing, so we had to go and purchase some right out of the gate. And I'm thankful we did, because if we hadn't, we wouldn't have gotten it, because everybody's kind of doing it now. But our first sound check, we had 2 neighbors come over and tell us that we needed to keep it down because we were interrupting Zoom calls in their living room. So we were really, really, really hesitant about that, but we checked with Blacksburg PD, and as long as you keep it under a certain number of people and certain level of decibels. You know, we're in Hokie country, so they fire the cannon. You can hear the stadium in the fall. So, you know, we're only a 25-minute service every Sunday. So we haven't had any trouble since. The people that complained when we did the sound check actually sent us a really nice email this Sunday after our first service saying that they appreciated they don't attend our church, but they appreciated what we were doing for our folks. And they actually come out on their porch and listen to our service now and about every Sunday. So that's worked. We've been blessed in that regard that, you know, the neighborhood has been pretty supportive.
Anybody have any questions for JB? Go ahead, Kendra.
Did you say you limit the number of cars that come in the parking lot, or just the support staff?
Just the support staff. No, we don't limit the number of cars. On Easter Sunday, we had 98 vehicles. And, you know, but there again, we planned on how to park them. Like, we get everybody unparked at the end of service in 10 to 15 minutes. So it's logistically, we worked out, you know, we're going to park them this way. We've got parkers. That's their job. That's all they do. They park. We've got 3 parkers. One of them is a police officer. So he's kind of in charge of that. And, you know, it's worked out well. I mean, you just can't let people come in and park where they want to. But, and we also have a school across the street with a flat lot. So some folks park over there. And, but we can fit about between 95 and 100 there on the church property.
Excellent. Any other questions? Again, the purpose of this call is to just talk about different things other than Zoom meetings.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Could you detail a little bit more about this kind of sound system you're using? Or how are you projecting out into the parking lot? Do you have microphones and an amplifier? Are you using a radio signal? How are you doing the sound?
Well, we looked into the radio signal, and in Blacksburg, we found that it didn't get real positive reviews because it would cut in and out. So what we did, we got 2,000-watt, I think they're Yamaha speakers, and we put one on each corner of the church roof. And we have a soundboard and a mic that we attach to the scissor lift. So sound hasn't been like, we could broadcast to Lane Stadium if we wanted to. So we dialed it back a lot, but and it was relatively inexpensive, you know, for what we're doing. So I mean, the speakers themselves, I think together, and the soundboard was about $1,000, a little better than $1,000. So didn't break the bank.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And while you're talking, Sid, do you have something to share as well? And do you want to share?
Sure.
Do you want to share too?
This is I'm Sid Cowgill, the minister at First Christian in Lynchburg, and I'm pleased to say that we are very much an email church. We have become a pretty proficient Zoom church. And our challenge is going to be finding the best appropriate ways to phase in a return to church, because no one is particularly anxious to jump back in because of the health risks and the safety risks. And so I am very interested to hear about the outdoor service in Blacksburg. I think that that's wonderful. And since part of our future story, as part of our epiphany process, is to develop an outdoor worship site over the next 5 years or so, there's no time like the present, especially this present. And so it might be time as we get into the summer, nice weather, to talk about developing an outdoor service. So I am really thankful for hearing about this today. As we move into the summer, we're hoping to draw the congregation together by using something that maybe some of you have tried before, Flat Jesus, the Flat Jesus concept, which is admittedly primarily for children and for Vacation Bible School, started by the Presbyterian Church. The idea is to find a template of Jesus, and you laminate them with his, you know, bulbous eyes and pudgy nose and all, and you take Jesus with you on your travels. You put him in your backpack and you take him camping, and you put him in your wallet and you take him to the office. And the idea, of course, is that Jesus is always with us. Our Christian Education Committee wants to write the words, "I am with you always," part of the Great Commissioning. We're going to stitch that on his hymn, and we're going to find a more adult looking Jesus, I think, and we're going to offer this to the entire congregation for the duration of COVID-19. And then in the fall, what we want to do is elicit feedback from the congregation about all the places where Jesus has actually been. Have you been to grandmother's house somewhere in Virginia? Have you been hiking, you know, up the Blue Ridge Parkway? Wherever Jesus has been with you, we will want to know that. And that's kind of a visual activity that will, I think, bind us together in some ways. We just had a death in the congregation yesterday, and so this is going to be our first round at experiencing a death in the church during this time. And so I'll be working with the family on what kind of options are available for a memorial service, hopefully in the very near future. But that's what's going on at First Christian in Lynchburg.
Excellent. Any questions for Sid on Flat Jesus? Sarah?
Not just a question, but we've used Flat Jesus, and Spark Publications has some really good pictures. A couple of them look like he's walking. He's got the staff and all. It was we thought were kind of neat. And we've used that in the summer when so many people were on vacation. And
Yes.
had response from the adults. They took him to restaurants and parks and Las Vegas and out everywhere. So we had some real good response with that. And I was thinking about using that again. It's good to hear you guys using it. I think we'll probably pull him out again. One of the things that we did over Palm Sunday, which was one of our first weeks off, was I made a kind of a care kit for all of our members with some information, a little bit of candy and egg, and their palm branch and all the good stuff, put it in a bag. And I delivered it to our 6 elders because I figured I could make that much contact safely. And then the elders delivered it to their care groups, which were about the same size. So everybody in the congregation got a little bit of personal contact, even though it was just porch front, and got really good response from that. So thinking, depending on how the new phase in goes, that may be something we will do again as we move into the end of spring. Some kind of a care kit, you know, like you send to our college students or something.
What a great idea.
Sarah, what's your church name?
Oh, excuse me. I am the pastor at Luray Christian Church, and we're suffering lack of visitors right now with the park closed, and you know, we're a tourist town, so this is getting interesting all real fast.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Again, I believe in the body of Christ, and I know you all have ideas. Anybody actually been using that ancient thing called phone or actual letters in any way in ministering?
I've got a couple of examples for that.
Okay.
Can I dive in? So on the phone, I participated in my first phone-only worship service this last Sunday, and it went wonderfully well. They used freeconferencecall.com, and one of the nice things was that they concluded their service it took about a 50-minute service, and then at the next on the hour, everybody was invited to be at their table, kitchen table, whatever table, and the prayers that had been raised during the service, they were invited to pray at the same time in their own home offline. So that was kind of a nice little addition. And then on the mail thing, when the stay-at-home orders first started, one of my new interim pastors at Winchester Avenue Christian Church in Martinsburg, West Virginia, the Sunday before, he quickly asked how many people are on Facebook. I want to do Facebook Live next week, and he had less than 10% of his congregation on Facebook, so he knew he couldn't do that. So the very first thing he decided to do was, the next day he came to church and he went around the building and took pictures. A lot of them were up close pictures of features of the building inside and out, and then created, it was basically a newsletter for the off week, and put all these pictures in the newsletter and said, do you know where this is in your church? And had a little game. And he said they loved it. So he's continuing to do something. He has something in the same thing for kids. You know, he'll have like a coloring thing for the kids or something like that. But this has really attracted the adults, and it also keeps them connected with the building while they're not in it, which has also helped. They feel like they have a connection with the building. So I just offered that.
Excellent. And Jim, were you going to say something about using telephone or letters?
Letters determined how many of the congregants were connected to Facebook and how many weren't. And another local minister, disciple minister, had a smaller congregation, and he had been sending out copies of his typed sermon each week to everyone in the church. And I have about 12 that probably fit in that congregation, 12 to 13 that probably fit in that situation. And so I'm sending out the sermons to them through the mail, snail mail.
Excellent. Other ideas, non-technical or just different, anything other than Zoom is what I wanted to talk about today.
Bill, may I ask Sandra to repeat what she said about the care packages for her church and the content? I'd like to hear her just say another word about that, if Sandra's still with us.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
What I was thinking of was a way that they could do, I had people that were just really heartsick because they weren't going to get to wave the palms and do the whole thing that we're normally doing. So I wanted, just a little toy or something. I put a plastic Easter egg with some candy in it, and a note with some prayers for Palm Sunday and a greeting. Then there was, of course, the palm branch, because we had already ordered those, and I could do that. And what I asked them to do in the note was to use the palm branch as a decoration on their doors, so that their neighbors would see what they were doing, and send me those pictures by email or on Facebook, whatever. And then I posted all those on our webpage and on our email and our face page, so that they could share them. And there were 2 or 3 who did, and they were very creative. And then I got comments from other people that they enjoyed seeing that, which is what intrigued me about the about doing Flat Jesus again. Is I think we'll do the same sort of thing. Is, just take a cheap Dollar Tree bag and fill it with some good treats and some contact, and that goes out then to not only the folks that can do Zoom and Facebook, but it also then gives a personal contact to our 3 or 4 people that don't have any tech. And check with them with telephone. I haven't seen them, so that's a way to make sure that the elders are following up on their folks too.
Right. Thank you. And I wonder what kind of creative thing could be done along those lines with Pentecost Sunday coming up on May 31st. If there is something that we can put in people's hands on Pentecost that would, suggest the Holy Spirit, dove, flame, all the symbols of Pentecost. I'm going to be thinking about that over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm
Do
kind of
red
playing with
streamers.
that idea too.
Excellent. And I'm going to go to Mickey and then to Gail.
So for your Pentecost, we did similar with Palm Sunday, and I had people send me videos of them waving their palms. You could have streamers delivered, red, orange, yellow, have them put it on a stick, make some kind of flame, have your families wave it, create a video of your families all waving their flames. That'd be one way.
That's perfect.
We actually celebrated drive-through communion on Maundy, Thursday, and Easter, which was basically standing in the parking lot for an hour with one deacon, gloved and masked, and people drove by. I had the words of institution and a bit about our church printed up on a flyer that we could hand them, and then we had the prepackaged communion. It's hard to open, so I figured if we gave it to them in their car, they could either spill it all over their car or they could take it home and take the hacksaw to it. But we were thinking about doing that again on Pentecost. The coolest part was we got the Baptist preacher down the street came by. It was a total random group of people that don't belong to us. And then all of our over 90 crowd is out driving. They don't really get the mask thing that other people can get infected. So that was a winner for the drive-through communion. It was during the daytime and they could drive through and have communion. We saw everybody. We offered a prayer if they wanted to do that. But that worked best for us.
I'm particularly curious. I've seen some things out there for pastoral care issues. I've seen pastors doing what I think would be called sidewalk visits. So they stay on the sidewalk and the members are on the porch. So clear social distancing, but able to sort of bring a pastoral care devotion to those particularly who just simply don't have internet, don't have email, don't have any of that, but still finding a way to stay connected with people. As well as I've been noting which might play in here too, is the chalk drawings or something like that. Any of you all been doing any of that? Or how are you been doing pastoral care? So that's a general question. Raise your hands and I'm gonna go to Mike and then to Mickey. And Mike, you need to unmute your mic.
Yep. Sorry, a little slow, a little old. We have a shepherding type program that I divided among my elders and deacons. We have a family list that goes out, a different family list for each elder and deacon each month. So in a year's time, they are in charge, so to speak, of each family in the church. But what I do is when we're using Zoom, so we're not in this category. But we do a lot of calling, and everybody that doesn't attend, we call. And I call everybody in the church basically every other week. And those calls are sometimes an hour long. People are bored, lonely, tired, but I try to make sure that every member that doesn't attend, because we do have some that don't and can't, has an idea of what went on. I like Jim's idea of mailing the sermon, but I preach off of the outline. It wouldn't help him much. And I unlike him, I do not have the thing of writing. But I think it's important to keep a contact with every member of the church in some way or the other, especially those who are shut in because now their families can't visit them.
Mike, I don't send the sermon out. Our folks don't want the sermon. They want the bulletin. It's just something about holding the bulletin in their hands.
I've been trying to get away from the bulletin for years. I'm not encouraging it.
We turned it into the newsletter. It's serving both purposes, and it goes out every Friday on email with the entire bulletin, so you can follow the YouTube worship service with it, or you can sing all the songs because the words are listed there by yourself.
Now, we don't sing songs, but we do say the Lord's Prayer all together, and it's marvelous. It kind of gives you the idea of how God hears all our prayers at the same time. Tickles me to death.
Wow.
Excellent. Hey, almost like Pentecost, I suppose, huh? Mickey, you had something? Hi.
I found an idea on another website or a Facebook page, and I just threw it out to my church last week to do chalk drawings on our parking lot. You know, our parking lot is empty. So I thought, why would we not create some inspiration? Didn't know how it would work out. So I just threw it out there. Seemed like I got a lot of people say, yeah, that's cool, let's do that. When it came down to it, I only had 7 people register. I tried to register them so that I could schedule them so that not everybody showed up at the same time. It was going to be a freeze overnight on Friday, so I thought, hey, I need to cancel this, but I didn't. We had over 20, 25 families show up, family units show up through the day, and they just scattered themselves. I popped in throughout the day to see if I need to replenish chalk. They chose parking spaces away from each other and did the beautiful art on our church parking lot. It turned out more beautiful than I ever imagined, because then we also had some elderly who weren't going to come out and get on the floor and chalk draw, but they drove through last Saturday night to see what had been left on the parking lot. And I created a video this morning to send back out, but you know, we moved quickly on it. The rain came and washed a lot of it away yesterday, but for Saturday and for Saturday evening, it was a brief moment of joy in an empty parking lot.
That's excellent. Any questions about that? Anyone? That's kind of cool. Others, anything that you've been doing during this time period that would be helpful for the rest of the church on?
I was just going to say to Mickey, I don't know if that gets posted on your Facebook page or someplace that's kind of public. I would love to see that. That sounds very fun. I don't know if you could put your Facebook page in the chats or something. That'd be great.
Mike, go ahead.
Mickey, have you thought about having the local newspaper take a picture of, do it again, have the local newspaper do a picture of it?
If we do it again, maybe. I hadn't thought, it was just so quick. I hadn't thought about that. You know, it was just, I think Wednesday I saw the idea, Thursday I put it out, and Saturday, you know, we were there. And I live in a small town of about 9,000. And finding chalk was an issue, because I think family is buying chalk for their kids because they're doing a lot of, you know, outdoor creative stuff. But that's a good idea if we do that again. I hadn't thought about that. Thank you.
Do you hear me?
Don, go ahead.
Yeah. For the pastoral calls, I've been utilizing what Mike has been, elders making weekly calls. And myself, I call everybody about every other week. As far as the what we've been doing, we've been utilizing Zoom for Sunday worship. We've been utilizing Facebook, email, snail mail, and then Sunday worship service we're having on the radio on 3 different radio stations every Sunday. And beginning next week, if the weather permits, we're going to start having outside what we're calling the gathering. Rather than drive-by church, it'll just be called the gathering. And people will be able to sit outside in their cars, or they'll be able to bring their lawn chairs and whatever. And kind of that'll be our first time that we're actually going to gather together again as a body.
And if I'm correct, the one thing that people may not know is that your church building burnt down just as COVID-19 was happening. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, I'm with Pleasantville Christian Church, and also the church was just about finished with remodeling. We had a private benefactor that came in and wanted to redo the entire sanctuary inside of it, and so that's also been part of what's been happening with us. So we will be building one. We're waiting for the demolition to take place. But until then, the local funeral home has allowed us to use their chapel when we can start worshiping together, which everyone seems very, very pleased with. They have a big lawn and a big parking lot, and that's why we're not saying any. So right now we're not going to use church language, and so we're just calling worship the gathering. I was interested to know, however, and to ask how, what are some ways about doing communion? I could use some suggestions about that when you're having an outside gathering like that. I sort of like the one idea I think I heard where someone mentioned a grape or grapes and what was it? Yeah, grapes and bread in a baggie, and you take it to the people, or have someone take it to the people. I could use some suggestions regarding communion.
Mike, and go ahead.
Why don't you have them just bring their communion with them in the car?
That's a good idea.
And that way nobody's touching it, and it's not that difficult to do.
BYOBB.
There you go.
Well, and again, I know that we're all struggling with this issue, and we do have to be very, very careful because, as different states and different places decide what's acceptable, for regathering, we know that we as church, we're just not good at following all those rules and thinking about all that stuff. We are the main place of which, since the virus still exists, it will respread if we do it wrong. So just want to encourage, that's my public service announcement, as be careful and don't rush back. But that's why we're having this conversation. What other ways can we help keep our church connected? Because we know that they want to be connected. So how do we do that so that we don't rush back and create more danger for our people? So I do like the idea of bringing your own communion the same way we do it on Zoom. It's just people bring their own. It's still church and still worship. So other ideas, suggestions? David, go ahead.
Yeah, we've been doing BYOC for several weeks now, both in parking lot and at home. But our governor has announced that beginning after this week that we can come back at 50% capacity in our various church buildings. We have a meeting this week with our church reopening committee, and one of the things that I've been charged with the task of is trying to figure out the best way to do communion. And I think my recommendation is going to be is that we practice a time of remembrance without observance. So I'm going to try to intentionally take the next month or 6 weeks and use our communion time to do instruction about communion. We might use artwork, we might use video, we might use special music, we might use testimonials, ways for us to concentrate on what communion means, what it looks like and feels like. I may even symbolically break bread and pour wine to show it. But I think we're going to try to do, my recommendation to my committee is going to be we do some creative things that help us to focus on communion so that we can remember without necessarily observing it.
Thank you. And I see that Kevin has come into the picture. I've asked him to, he's been disturbing his neighborhood as well with worship. Anything else you want to share, Kevin, today as we talk about non-technical kind of things?
Yeah, so from our perspective, we kind of started right from the get-go with parking lot worship. And when it comes to communion, so we do 3 things for communion. One, we are using, for those who, the same, I guess, regular communion with the cup and the wafer. And so we have one tray of that, and that's of course sanitized before the service. And then there are very strict guidelines that we emailed out for people who just for whatever reason want to take it that way, as far as how that's handled. And then we also have done the snack cup, the covered cups that come prepackaged, and we had those come in, and then there are individuals who were able that we were able to get them delivered to them, so that if they want to bring those with them, that they can, or do it at home, they can. And then we've got those that do the bring your own. And so what we have talked about is it's not so important what you use and how you do it, it's the intentionality of it, and kind of giving people the free reign to figure out how they're comfortable doing it. And so we're blessed in that we've kind of got a perch above our parking lot, which kind of works out really well for me. And so I just went out, and I'm an old DJ, so I've got a speaker, and I use my tablet and everything. And so I'm using my wife, and one other lady will sometimes sing, but it's all pre-prepared music, and I try to stick to stuff I think people are going to know. Even though now we see ourselves kind of branching out into a wider audience, but also, it's figuring out how to meet people where they are. So we're having the discussions about when we come back and what that's going to look like. And actually, we have a leadership team meeting tonight. And at our last meeting, I stated, hey, we will probably take another 4 or 6 weeks and stay. And it may be August before we seriously consider going back into our sanctuary. As long as the weather's good, we'll stay outside. And part of that is because we have people with some health issues, and we have quite a few older persons. I've got a lady who's 90 who drives up every Sunday, and and sits in the parking lot with the windows down, and she jams out and dances in the car to the music, and everything's fine. It's what we've told people is, going back, it's going to be kind of new. Now, what I have done, because I actually have quite a few persons in nursing homes and places, of course, that I cannot visit yet. And so I did a card writing campaign, which is for me is a little different because, my bachelor's degree is in computer science. So I'm definitely a digital guy. I am not analog at all. Like, it drives my wife insane. I am not the analog guy. But I took an afternoon and wrote everybody in the congregation a card and mailed it off to them, to include people who visited, and that has been a huge response, because even our people in the nursing homes and places like that, they were able to get a touch. So we've just been kind of planted as the air, trying to figure out different ways to kind of reach everybody. Our newsletter was digital, and so we've mailed out copies to everybody, because of course a lot of people still aren't coming to the church, so they can't pick up their newsletter, and so we're doing as much as we can to get information out to people. And like tomorrow, I will do a video for our announcements. I've started to do a weekly video update that we're posting on our Facebook page, and emailing to all of our people, just so that these are the announcements, this is what's going on, these are the things to consider. And one thing our church did vote to do was we do a monthly feeding with our community table that we were doing once a month to feed the community. We've continued that by doing box lunches. And so the last month we used KFC. We contracted with KFC to provide meals for 30 families. And then this month, which is next week, they'll decide tonight if it's going to be KFC again. But so they reached out to a couple of other local restaurants to see. And so we're still feeding people. We're still doing things. It's just at a distance. And so that worked, because with the box lunches, it was like a drive-through last week. People literally drove up into the parking lot. They were out there in the little tent. They handed them their food. And the people that showed up for, canned goods, handed them the pre-done bags of canned goods, and people didn't have to come in. And so we're just trying to figure out different ways to do it.
Excellent. And just connecting it back with JB was talking about what they're doing in Blacksburg and that kind of parking lot kind of worship. What has been your response from your neighborhood since it's right there?
Well, actually, the neighbors are starting to come out in the last several Sundays. They'll bring their lawn chairs out. They'll sit in their front yards. They will take communion with us. And it was funny because some of them are been people who previously have been invited but would never actually come to the church, but they have no problem coming out on their front porches and sitting. And this past Sunday, of course, was Mother's Day, and we actually had people who came over and decided they want to take communion. And then, of course, I had to stop and like re-explain because my son was passing out communion Sunday, and he was like, "No, you can't do that. No, you can't." And so I had to kind of re-explain to him. But it's been an interesting response. I thought that, we'd just be dealing with people, probably the people in the parking lot, but more and more people from the community are coming. And one lady, her family came over, and they actually all sat in her front yards. There were about 15 people sitting in her front yard, all of her kids and grandkids listening to the worship service.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, this is what this is for, just sharing of ideas. And I appreciate all your sharing. Any other things today that, again, it's those things that we're learning to adapt. I will say again, please don't forget all the learnings that we have learned during this wilderness experience. If we go back to being the same, it will not be good for us. So Moses, are you trying to say something?
Yes, I am. This is Moses from Springfield Christian Church in Richmond. I've got two suggestions, and I have a tough question on the pressure of reopening for my church. I think I'll just throw it over there, but let me start with the good stuff. Our church mission team has been playing with our community for the past several months. We found we are from a wealthy neighborhood. So instead of doing drive-through to giveaway, which did not work the first several months, now we are doing drive-through for people to donate food. And that's been picking up like crazy. It's plugging the community to come together and to serve, connect with the church. We even, last 2 times, we actually opened the sanctuary door and we let people to come inside and to kind of leave their donations in a large basket. It's almost like them stepping into the sanctuary. These are community members who have never stepped into a sanctuary before. So it was like a wonderful way for them to plug in. That's one. That was the food drive-through. The second one, which worked like a divine miracle, was we were bringing our shepherding program we were bringing it in 2019, and this is the perfect time and elders to make pastoral calls at the end of the worship service and connecting with members who have not plugged in either via our Zoom or our phone conference on Sundays. So instead of calling and asking, "Hey, how are you doing?" these elders and shepherds call members and say, "This is the topic, this is what the sermon was, this is what the scripture was, these are the members we prayed over this morning." So it's more of almost they are passing and sharing that worship on a pastoral phone call. So it was, I think it's kind of really reaching out to members who have not connected on a regular basis via our Zoom Sunday morning service. So those are the 2 main things that's been working out pretty well. And let me get to the question part. This coming week, we are having a worship committee meeting, and most of my worship committee are some strong personalities who want to push for reopening the church soon. And with that being said, also we are following this week ending on Thursday with the board meeting. And I am trying to be a good listener, a minister at the same time, keeping the health and safety of everybody together for the. And I would love to hear any input. What are some questions I can kind of be faced with, how I can really guide everybody without making it into a political issue that we are all facing right now.
You may have just decided what my next week Doc Talk will be on. So you also should have received an email from me, and you'll receive a video this afternoon. I know that these are difficult times for you as pastors, in particular within your communities. I will be saying a very clear message that I don't think it's time for us to return. And I think, again, because we are who we are as church, and we just can't stop from hugging and touching and passing communion and breathing on each other, we are the main place that this virus will respread if we are not careful. And I think we have a responsibility not to come together at this point in time. But I think it's good. We should have a conversation about that next week. And so, and maybe I'd even love to reach out to our general minister and president if she might join us for that, to have a conversation about that. Oh, look, she's on the call now. So, sorry, who's talking? Go ahead.
Happy
David.
to do that, by the way, Bill.
Oh, thank you, Terry.
Happy, yeah.
Bill, one of the things in answer to Moses's question, and I don't know if this is helpful or not, one of the things that I've been doing since this whole business started was working really hard, because it inevitably and sadly has turned into what's very much a political discussion. And I have a very different political perspective from my board chair. But what I have tried to do from the start was try as best as I can to find, in our particular state, for those of you from out of state, we have a democratically controlled state house, and of course, President Trump's Republican. What I've been trying to do is find points of similarity as much as I can between what Donald Trump has said and what Ralph Northam, our governor, has said. And I'm really latching onto those phases that President Trump announced several weeks ago. And of course, Governor Northam has used the same language. So what I've been doing all along is just, and I've done it this morning, is I've gone to websites and I've pulled off those documents, and I'm making those available to my board chair and other people as quickly as I can, saying that this is what's being recommended to us. And our particular governor is very, very conservative in the way that he's trying to move us forward very, very slowly. So tomorrow night, the proof will be in the pudding. I've been trying to lay this groundwork literally since we started in this business, having these conversations with them and pointing out, well, this is what they've said, and this is what the government, what's recommended. And hopefully that will, I'm prayerfully hoping that will serve me instead when we meet tomorrow night, when we start talking about reopening and what it's going to look like. Because the sad part about making it such a political issue is we really are caught in the middle of these discussions. And to my mind, what's been helpful to me is passing the buck off and saying, well, you know, President Trump said that until we have 14 days of this, and this can't happen, or you know, Governor Northam did this, and this is what he said. And so far, every discussion I've had, that's worked. You know, my board chair said, oh, you know, you're right, and we have to be careful. So I guess the proof will be in the pudding tomorrow night if that ground, if I've laid any if the groundwork has laid any real points where we can work together on this.
David, thank you so much. I will keep that in my mind as I safely tread waters tomorrow and Thursday. And also, I want to add this information. Actually, our Zoom Sunday morning service has been bringing a lot more people who I have not seen in the church for the past 6 years. I've been in this church. There are members connecting, and I'm just so happy they're able to be in their bed on Sunday morning, holding a cup of coffee and still enjoy service. So I'm trying to bring this issue that, you know, it is not we are doing such a bad job, nobody's coming, that we are desperate to go back to the sanctuary. I think we're already doing such a great job. I think that's one of another incentive I've been trying to slowly and thoughtfully pat on people's back and saying, we are doing a great job. Let's continue doing that. But I'm anxious and curious to see where the worship committee leads this Tuesday and the board leads. And I'm really looking forward to next week's Doc Talk with both of our leaders leading. And I'm very curious.
Again, I know that these are difficult times, and you oftentimes are placed in the middle to be pastor to all, and yet at the same time wanting to give the best advice. So I think next week will indeed be a conversation about this. So I know other regional ministers, and some are on this call, are offering the same kind of things, and so just my prayers for everybody during this time. Be kind and gentle, but at the same time, good leaders in the midst of your communities. Any other conversation? I don't want to stop that, but at the same time, we will be having this conversation next week on this topic. Go ahead, Betsy.
Yes, just to remind you all, it is recorded. So you could take what we talk about next week and share that with your leadership, and that will help give them a greater perspective too, if they're not on the call with us.
And to all Virginia ministers out there, remember, you can always blame the regional minister. I am fully accepting of anything that you need me to say to help you in your ministry. So.
Same here, and probably for all of us.
Me
Any
too.
other conversation? Go ahead, Terry.
No, I was just saying me too. Blame it on me.
That's what we call leadership, right? So we are in this together. I want to thank everybody for this conversation. It will be recorded and shared. I love the way we are church. We have so many great ideas. Let's just keep sharing them together with one another. And blessings upon all of you this day. Have a great day, and hope to see you next week.